Hello and welcome to Theme Park History Episode 11. Today we explore the world's oldest and still functioning theme park. The park is known as Bakken, but the full name is actually Dyrehavsbakken. Shall we start with some basic facts? Bakken is located about 10 minutes north of Copenhagen in a suburb called Klampenborg. Even more precise, it's located in the woods of Dyrehaven, hence the full name Dyrehavsbakken. By the way, Dyrehaven translates as deer park. So we have Bakken in the Royal Deer Park of Klampenborg. It seems that as from 1583, Bakken was originally considered a health spring, based on the legend of Kirsten Piil, a young girl who got lost north of Copenhagen. A myth states that the hillside opening up into a spring. The spring was followed by Kirsten back to Copenhagen. From the myth onwards, people flocked to use the springs as medicinal and leisure usage. This holy spring was slowly forgotten. However, Danes still visited other holy springs within Denmark. Moving through time, the sand reaches the side of the glass that reads 1750. Having previously rediscovered the spring, Brinkman and Grieve restored it to its former glory. The spring surroundings have been the local king's ground for a number of years. From 1746 until 1756, the spring area was private for the king's social gatherings. From 1756, the spring was free to enter for all based on charitable donations. Donations that were thrown into the spring were for a local hospital. The hospital at the time may have been called an infirmary. The Deer Park Springs became a place for trade, traders paying taxes for nothing more than an annual place per year. People were learning that the springs had no medical benefits. People still flocked to the Deer Park as this spring was still flowing. Purely memoirs of a somewhat false medical belief. As trade grew, so did the entertainment. Behind the spring on the hill near side, alcohol started to flow. As did people who provided equestrian entertainment. I suppose you could call it the Copenhagen Funfair. Trumpets, jesters and male gentry riding horses. Life at the fair for the traders was different from the visitors. Behind closed doors, they lived in squalid conditions. It seems around the 1760s, Funfair rides were active in the Deer Park. Human-powered Ferris wheels and swinging ships entertained the visitors. The Deer Park had also gained a reputation around Europe. Entertainers of many types visited the Deer Park to become part of a growing history. Going into the late 1700s, English and Italian companies somewhat allied. They established themselves as arts presenters, gaining a stronghold working together. Apparently, the spring was so popular that its popularity spread not only by event but also in literature. 1819 came along after war and Denmark had its first steamship. Steamships operated between Copenhagen and Bellevue. But with the steamships came an increase in trade after the suffering of war. Despite the war, Bakken came back to its strengths. Rides instead of market tents started to take precedence over the spring area, meaning the old name of Kirsten Piil's Kild was evolving into Bakken. The market traders were focusing on the trading on the hill. Time slowly progressed, as did the steam industry. Around the 1840s, Bakken had a steam carousel, and later was followed by a steam railway. Different classes found different interests at Bakken. It seemed the gentry came to watch others, whilst the working class came along with their young ones to enjoy Bakken in its finest form. Trade grew in masses, as in 1863, Klampenborg received its first train line. It seems the 1800s continued at Bakken with entertainments, steam rides and semi-permanent stalls. However, even into the late 1800s, the market traders still had issues with primitive conditions. Actually, in 1885, they set out to oppose this and set up the Tent Holders Association. Between 1906 and 1911, telephone electricity was introduced respectively. Telephone and electricity was introduced respectively. At this point, I want to inform you listeners that Bakken always operated during what was called a spring season, which varied in length through the years. First World War did mean that this springtime was shortened, so far we have heard in minor detail about the progress of Bakken's flat rides, somewhat progressing itself into a theme park status. So shall we move on to what we are really here for? Let's talk roller coasters. From 1924 to 1930, Rutschebanen, a wooden sit-down thrill coaster, was at Bakken, but due to a fire, it was destroyed. Within the years 1937 to 1939, Bakken hosted a coaster called Slangebanen, a wooden sit-down thrill that contained no inversions but included dips and track crossings, also considered bigger than your typical coaster during this era. Flying Turns was Bakken's next historical coaster. This was a wooden thrill bobsled coaster that operated from 1939 to 1946. It was SB&O after 1946 up to 1949, and then it relocated to Finn's Tivoli. Well, it's 1972 and Zera have produced this one. It's a coaster called Racing. Bakken claimed the coaster was on site from 1972, but it was known to have been on the travelling scene up until 1974. Racing stopped operating in Bakken as of 2020. It was then relocated to Bomischaprata. Next, we have Linny 88. This was a Zera Tivoli Still Family sit-down coaster from 1977 to 1980. It was eventually scrapped. Folks, there are more coasters currently operating at Bakken, but that would not be theme park history. So that's it for today. See you soon.